Hello again. This is the lesson walkthrough for Lesson 6 Random Numbers in the Interactive Animations and Games chapter of the Computer Science Discoveries unit at code.org. Let's get started. As usual, we are confronted with a predict level. For starters, the code below introduces a new math block, random number. Try to predict what will happen when you press the run button. I see 3 lines here: background tomato, fill orange, and ellipse, with a random number block in as the first parameter, which is the x position of the ellipse. So I predict this will draw an orange ellipse on a red background. The ellipse will have a random x position that is between 200 and 400 pixels inclusive. And sure enough. Okay, recording. You guys heard that little beep? Yeah, that was someone sending me a text message. And when that happened, it turned off my audio. So I'm now recording this as a voiceover after the fact as I edit. So I'm just going to have to do this as a voiceover. So here I'm demonstrating that it moves back and forth in the x direction since we put the random number block in for the first argument on the ellipse. I think I'm also about to talk about how on line 1 it says background tomato, which is interesting. That may come as a surprise that you could put that in as an argument. That's an HTML color name, and there's 140, I'm about to Google it here, it's 140 different words that can be accepted as arguments in the background as colors. It's all the colors that are supported by the browser. So if you Google HTML color names and you go to the first result, that's the W3 Schools site right here. Click that. That brings up all modern browsers support the following 140 color names. So any of these colors here, any of these you can put in as an argument for that background. Or fill or stroke will also accept these. Make sure that you put them in quotes when you use a color name. You can also get to any other color you want by using an RGB function, but we haven't talked about that yet. But that's to come. Moving on. Level 2. You have a new block in the math drawer called random number. If you make drawings with random numbers, it'll look a bit different every time you run your program. Click the block and read its documentation to learn more. Right now, the program only draws an ellipse on the right side of the screen. Update it so it could go anywhere horizontally on the screen. So we're going to take another random number block and do it just like the first one. Oh, no, we're not. We're just going to change the 200 here to 0 because that increases the range, right, of the x values. So that'll go all the way across the screen. In the next level, we put the same random number block in for the y. That's here. Right now, the x coordinate's random, but you can make the y coordinate random too. So we go to math, we drag a random number in for the y argument, the y position. We change the arguments here from 0 to 400. And now it appears anywhere in the output window randomly. Moving on. Level 4, variables and random numbers. We can assign a random number into a variable and then use it later in the program. This is the assessment level from the last lesson. And you can see on line 2 it has I size equals 27. We're just going to drop the random number block in there instead of the 27, right? And then it will use it down below. Anytime it uses I size, it's going to put that random number in. This level kind of preps you for practice B with the flags that everyone struggles with. It's the same process. We create a random number, we store it in a variable, and then we use that variable later in the program to access the random number that is stored there. And there you have it. Moving on to level 5, changing variable values. This is the petals. The two flowers use a single variable to store their petal size, changes in the middle of the program, make them random. Update the first flower's petals to be a random size, and update the second flower's petals to be a random size. So we're just going to use the random number block again in similar fashion to what we did in the last level. We're going to pull the random number over into on top of that 30 right there, so it generates a random number and stores it in petal size. I made it from 5 to 25, which is too small, but it doesn't really matter. I'm doing the same thing here, and I make this one bigger from 70 to 123. Run it, and you can see that it's randomizing the sizes, and then I'm like, oh, this one's, wow, tiny petals, and the others look way too big. So I kind of adjust my numbers here. I think I make that, 15, and then I dial this one down to, 90 or something. 40 to 90. That's a little more reasonable. Good, moving on. The practice, modify the planets as first. The scene represents several planets. They're all the same size. Use random numbers to change the size of each planet to generate a new scene each time it's run. So we're going to drop a bunch of random number blocks in here. And instead of position, this time we're using width and height. The third and fourth parameters. So I drop one in there. I drop one in for width and height. Then I realize, oh, wait, in the example, they don't change the width and height. I'm talking about the size of the planet and figuring out what size I want there. And I was like, oh, they're about 50, so I'll go from 40 to 60. And then I realized, oh, if I look at the example, they're not changing the width and height. They're only changing the width or the height. So we can just do one block for each of these ellipses. Doesn't matter which. Here I'm changing the values. And it's kind of a subdued effect. You don't really see it very well. So then I go back and I make it more pronounced by dialing that down to 30, 30, 70. And I'm like, maybe a little more, maybe 20 to 80. And it doesn't really matter as long as you change it to something. It'll be fine. And I'm finally satisfied. And moving on. Yes, the flag. This is the one that causes people fits. So we're I'm starting over because I already solved it. So we are we've got a random number here. It generates a random number. They're all at different random numbers, right? They're not stacked. We need it to generate a random number and to use the same number 3 times, because the way it is, it's going to give you a different random number. So the way to do that is to generate the random number up top. There's a hint here, right? Because that line 2 says var x position equals 100, and there's a little, yellow triangle next to it, a warning sign. I'm going to hover over it here in a second. And it basically says you haven't used this variable, which is fine, but that's a hint that why would we have it there if we're not going to use it? So the hint is we need to use the variable. There it is. X position is defined, but it's not called in your program. So we need to use that. So we're going to pull this random number block up here. And that's going to generate the random number from 0 to 150. And it's going to store it into X position. Get rid of those other ones. And then we'll use that stored variable down below. I'm copying it here. I'm going to paste it and paste it and paste it. And that way, we get the same random number all 3 times. Moving on. Modify the scene to randomize the location of the sun and the mountains. So I'm kind of looking over the program to see what it's doing here. The yellow ellipse is obviously the sun. So I think we tackle that first. And we're going to randomize both the X and the Y. So I'm going to drop this in over the 80. And, drop this in over the 50. And I'm showing the grid here to kind of decide where I want to place it. So with the X position, we can go to like 50 to 350. We'll keep it in the picture. And then the Y position, maybe from, 50 to 100. So it's still up in the sky. And here I'm looking at, how high do the mountains go? And where should I put the sun? So I settled on 50 to 100. And I'm testing it out here. Looks good. Sometimes it's peeking out from behind the mountain. Sometimes it's high in the sky. Okay, moving on. The rectangle at the bottom, the green rectangle, is clearly the ground. And so the regular polygons are the mountains. And we want to change the X position. So we're going to put it in a random number block for all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those for the X position, the first parameter. And I'm going to go from 0 to 400 for each of these. And there we have it. And that is the last practice, so we're almost finished. Let's move on to the assessment. I can't believe that messages turned off my microphone. I guess this works okay. It took me a long time to record this. The wiggly worm. The wiggly worm. So we need to add 3 more circles. We've got red, orange, yellow. We need to add green, blue, violet. And these are, we're putting a random number in for the Y coordinate that goes from 190 to 210. So the easiest way to do this is to click and drag and then copy it and paste, paste, paste. Paste it 3 times. We're going to change yellow to green and then blue. And then here I'm discovering that there's no violet or purple in the list. So we got to type that in. That is an HTML color name. It will work. And I try violet, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of pinkish. I wonder what purple looks like. Purple gives you a darker color. There's more red to it. It's more of like a wine color. I don't know what I'm looking at here. Oh, I'm changing the X because they're all on top of each other. So I'm changing the X, looking at the pattern and just continuing the pattern down. It increases by 40 each time. And there we have the wiggly worm. And that's it. I'm going to glance at the challenges here, but again, those are optional. So hope this helps. Sorry about the audio. Good to know that messages will turn my microphone off, but that's part of working with a computer, right? The reality is, if you're working on a computer, you're going to lose work at some point, and we just have to work around these things. So, hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time. Bye.